Okay, in this video, we're going to talk about the pressure gauge and resting bar pressure, which I think is something that's a little misunderstood. So first off, this is the pressure gauge. There's two needles. The top dial here, this is for your steam pressure, and it's going to usually be around 1.5 bars of pressure. You'll see there's a little black tick there that's at 1.8. That's the max you could possibly have this at, and you really don't want it to be much over 1.5. Like where it sits now, 1.6 is perfect. We want it to be there. If it gets over that dash there, that tick of 1.8, you're gonna have your pressure relief valve open up and you're gonna have steam kind of come out from everywhere. So just keep that in mind. This top one, steam gauge, you want it to pretty much always read at 1.5 when the machine's on. Obviously, if you have the machine off, it'll go down to 0. And as you're using the steam, it'll go down a little bit and then it'll heat back up and you'll see it kind of build back to, the correct pressure there. So top one, steam, bottom, this is your pump pressure or your coffee boiler pressure. So this one is a little bit misunderstood, I think, and a little more complicated. It's not complicated, but it can be. So what we're looking at right now, this machine has been kind of sitting. I haven't pulled really any shots on it. So you would think, oh, it's resting and I want to see it at 12 bars of pressure. But that's not true. You're only going to see it at 12 bars of pressure when the machine is actually heating up. So if it's just sitting idle, you'll see it could get all the way down to your line pressure, which will be around 3 bars of pressure. And that's fine. That's totally fine. Now, when you're using it, right, you're pulling shots, you're using it, the machine is going to cool down because you're putting new water into the boiler, right? So as you're using it, then it's going to have to start heating back up. And as it starts to heat, that's when your gauge is going to start going up. And it's going to go up until it gets to about 12 bars of pressure. So it's going to heat. And, this one's already kind of at temperature. So let's cool it down a little more. And then we're going to see exactly how it builds. So it's pulling now, really cooling it down. All right, let's turn it off and let's see. So now as it's being used, that gauge is going to start moving up towards 12, right? And you can see here, as I mentioned earlier, the coffee boiler, you see that it is going to be heating because that is illuminated. And then it goes up. So it goes up to about 12. And then it should stop at around 12. Now what's happening is the water in the coffee boiler is expanding as it heats. We allow it to get up to 12 bars of pressure, and then it needs to drip out of the expansion valve. We need to relieve its pressure from the tank so it doesn't get too crazy pressurized, right? We decided that 12 is the highest number we want it to get to. So it's heating, it should get up to 12, and then it should start to drip out of your expansion valve, and that's what it's doing right now. So if you see it and it's going past 12, then you might need to loosen the expansion valve and you would just turn it to the left, and it should open earlier. And if it starts dripping out of the expansion valve, it never gets up to 12. It's only going to like 9 and it's starting to drip out of here. Then you could turn it to the right, tighten it. You might need to use gloves or a wrench sometimes. And that'll have it open at a higher pressure. So this is the expansion valve, and we want it to be dripping at 12 bars of pressure. We want to set it at 12 bars of pressure. Now, again, it's not going to always be at 12 bars of pressure. If you're not using the machine, if it's not heating, it's not going to be going up in pressure. So keep that in mind. If you're testing for your resting bar pressure, you need to run the groups, allow it to heat back up, and then once it's heating, then you could see if it's at the right pressure for the expansion valve. Now, there's a handful of reasons why you might never get to 12 bars of pressure. If it's a brew valve is leaking or there's a leak somewhere else, you're going to have that pressure escaping out of another valve that it shouldn't be, right? So this might be perfectly brand new, totally fine, and you're only getting like 6 bars of pressure. Well, then if it's dripping from somewhere else, that's an issue. You have to call that in. The other thing is these can leak as well. If they get worn down, they might just have get damaged and just start to constantly leak. They might be leaking at 3 bars of pressure. They always be leaking, or they might get stuck shut and you can't adjust it at all. And you'll start to notice too, these things get really corroded in coffee because all the coffee comes down the drain. All the espresso shots, they get poured and they go into the drain here, and whatever you're dumping down the drain, this is going to get covered in coffee. So when this thing starts to get really corroded, if you start to see it leaking out of here at a pressure that it shouldn't be, like anywhere under 12 bars of pressure, and you can't adjust it, then that's definitely something you should call in. Also, call it in if no matter what you do to adjust it, you can make it as tight as possible and it still doesn't get up to 12 bars when it's heating, then also call it in. It's there's a leak somewhere else in the machine. And you'll probably see one of these tubes or on the Classic, it'll look a little different, but same idea. If this starts to leak out of these guys and not here, then that's where the pressure is escaping, and that is a problem that needs to be called in. So again, you want to see this reach 12 bars of pressure, but only when it's heating. That's the only time it's really needing to do that. Otherwise, it's just going to remain idle, and it can get, if I were to leave this overnight, I come in, it'll probably be around 3 bars of pressure. So don't worry if it's not at 12. You have to run the groups, let it cool down, and then allow it to heat back up, and that's when you can dial this in and have it set to 12 bars.